So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, folks beyond the binary, and welcome here to Bayes Business School. My name is Professor Andre Spicer, and I'm the Dean here at Bayes. I'm delighted to see all of you here tonight for our first in-person Centre for Charity Effectiveness talk in 2 years, so it's been a long time. This evening we'll be hearing from the leaders of 2 high-profile national charities on how they're working together to transform the experience of volunteers to ensure that they can recruit, train and develop new volunteering talent. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about Bayes. Quite a lot has changed in the last 12 months. We were previously known as Cass Business School, and in September 2012 we officially became Bayes, in line with our commitment to fostering and driving diversity, equality and an inclusive culture. Thomas Bayes, as some of you know, was a theologist and mathematician who's best known for Bayes' theorem. And if you want to, you can find him just down the Bunhill Road fields. Yeah. Now, the Bayes' theorem suggests that we get closer to the truth by constantly updating our beliefs in proportion to the weight of new evidence. It's this idea, not just the person, which is behind why we decided to change the name. And by deciding on this new name, we wanted to emphasize 3 principles we deeply believe in. We care, we act, we learn. Here at Bayes, we focus on developing the next generation of professionals and leaders in a range of sectors, obviously including charity. Our aim is to nurture leaders who care, leaders who are willing to rethink their own beliefs and who have the courage to act. By doing this, we think that they'll make a positive impact on business and on the communities and on the wider society which they're in. We're also conducting research which is at the cutting edge of practice. This can be seen in our recent REF results, which placed us 5th in the country for business and management research, and classed us as being world class. Our London home here reflects our ethos and distinctiveness. Bayes occupies this really interesting position, which is halfway between the City of London with its financial institutions and Tech City with Shoreditch, the tech firms, etc. But also, I think, the range of charities around us is an important next bit. Our location buzzes with events and energy, which we hope to expose our students to. An important part of all of this is the Centre for Charity Effectiveness. It's obviously a leader in the field, and that's why many of you are here tonight. In fact, all of you are here tonight. It's doing our work not just on improving charities and NGOs and other kinds of organisations in that sphere effectively, but we've broadened the work under the leadership of Justin and many others to look at the question about social purpose. We're beginning to cross over with work on ESG and broaden the scope of what the Centre is doing. The still focus continues to be improving management and leadership in the sector. Charities are often driven by ideals and important virtues. These virtues, I think, are vital and often critical, but more critical is balancing those virtues with reality. After all, Groucho Marx reminded us that the difficulty of doing this when he said, "I'm not a big fan of reality, but it's still the only good place to get a decent meal." Today's discussion, I think, will highlight this tension. It will look at the things of best practice, working collaboratively, and thinking about digital transformation. As a home of world-leading research, Bayes tries to value all of these things and nurture them in the next generation of business leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, folks beyond the binary, I'm very pleased that you are able to join us and to this wonderful event today. And now I'm going to pass over to the Director of CCE, Alex Scales, to introduce our speakers. Thank you, Alex.
Good evening. To build on the words that Andre has already offered, on behalf of all my colleagues, a very warm welcome to Bayes and to Bayes CCE, as the centre is more informally known. For those of you online and here in the auditorium, it's great to see so many. And for the latter, those of you in front of me, it is especially wonderful to see so many in person this evening. Those online, please don't take that the wrong way, but this is our first in-person charity talk for over 2 years. And prior to that, we had over 2 decades of regular charity talks in a very similar format, followed by drinks and eats and lively conversation. So and I know many others have really missed it, so it's great to have you back. Many of you will know that the building the CCE community of practice is absolutely core and an ongoing aim of ours. Being together, making those connections is so critical to this, so that we can all work together to strengthen the effectiveness of charities and social purpose organisations, and in that way each play our own small role in enabling social change. For those of you new to Bays, our centre is considered to be a leading centre for charities in the UK, the only one to sit within a business school, a school of management, which is a unique position, we believe. And as an international non-profit academic centre, we sit within the top 5 in the world. Education, fresh thinking and knowledge exchange is what we are all about. So do have a look at the website if you'd like to learn more. Obviously, so much of what we do relies on the generosity of our supporters and a lot of goodwill from many colleagues, both within Bays and the wider university. And this evening is no exception. So a very big thank you to you all. So on to this evening. I'm delighted to welcome Angela Salt, Chief Exec Girlguiding, and Matt Hyde, Chief Exec Scouts, both well known to us and the centre, and it's lovely to have you both back with us in person. I'm sure that there are many of you in the audience who will have had some touch point with one of these organisations. I still remember my time as a brownie, and forgive me, Angela, if I'm no longer in touch, so this information may be very, very dated, and with 3 sons, I haven't really re-engaged through my children. But I remember my time in a 6, the name given for the way the brownie pack was divided into, as the sixer, the name given to the leader of the 6, of my fellow Ghillie Doos. Now, I have no idea whether Ghillie Doos still exist or not, but I remember a little badge on the sleeve of some sort of elfin person, I suppose. And looking back, I had no idea that those activities and what was enabling me to do was being delivered by volunteers. But looking back now, I can see that tremendous time and effort that was put into that. All those volunteers who made those activities so possible and so enjoyable for us. And it was about a year ago when I learned about Matt and Angela's innovative project, generously funded by the Pears Foundation, to collaborate, to explore the use of digital innovation and how this could be used to enhance the experience of their volunteers, both organisations. And then to implement the findings to transform their volunteers' experience such that their delivery on the front line with the young people was absolutely top-notch. And such importance attached to those words that I emphasise: collaboration, exploration, innovation, transformation, words very close to the work that we do from CCE. So an invitation was swiftly issued to Matt and Angela, and the rest, they say, is history. Here we are, 12 months later, fortuitous timing with Volunteer Week having literally just finished yesterday evening or on the stroke of midnight. So Matt, Angela, welcome back. Thank you for being with us this evening, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you both. So if you could all just join me in welcoming Matt and Angela for this evening.
Good evening, everyone. It's very nice to see you in person, as Alex says, and nice to be joined online by so many others. It was about a year ago, and Alex said, do you want to do this talk? And Matt said, should we do it? And yeah, okay, why not? At that time, of course, there were a couple of dozen people on Zoom. So it's a very different experience. So thank you for being with us and making the time.
Good. Well, I'm Matt Hyde, if you haven't worked it out, and this is Angela Salt. So we are really, really excited to be talking to you tonight about this incredible collaboration.
So we're on an adventure together, fitting really for Girlguiding and Scouting. We're collaborating, as Alex says, on a digital change project, and we hope that it will enable both our organisations meet the demand that we're both facing and actually help us build our movements, and most importantly, and what it's all about, increase opportunities for young people. We're here tonight to be open to the challenges we face. We're going to share our learnings with you and say that this project and we are a work in progress.
So look, before we get going, we need to manage expectations, okay? So the first thing is, if you're here for a highly technical talk, you're in the wrong building. If you do have any questions that are of a highly technical digital nature, we can direct you to the right place. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is with some vulnerability and humility with which we stand here, because this digital transformation program hasn't actually launched yet. And so I know people in the room who have scars on your back from various digital programs that you have launched, and they are always bumpy. So that was with some trepidation that we agreed to do this before this actually launching. But what we wanted to do was in the spirit of the best digital transformation programs, with openness and transparency, we wanted to share where we're at on the journey so far, and then to tell you about the journey and where we're going from here. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, we just wanted to sort of zoom out for a second and talk a bit about why volunteering is so important. As Alex said, we've just come off the back of Volunteers Week. We've also come off the back of an incredible Jubilee weekend, where 16.7 million people were involved in various ways in thank you days and street parties, and that sense of coming together. And that comes off the back of a pandemic where there was a new appetite for volunteering. So 12.4 million people volunteered in the pandemic, 4.6 million of those for the first time, of which 3.8 million people said they wanted to volunteer again. And this, it really matters. I mean, volunteering really, really does matter. It matters for three reasons. It matters firstly because volunteering is good for you. It's good for your skills, it's good for your well-being, and it's good to have a sense of connection. These are becoming even more important, and they were particularly important during the pandemic. But secondly, it's good for the economy. So many of you will have heard the Andy Haldane speeches in the last couple of years. Andy Haldane, former chief economist from the Bank of England, levelling up czar for a period of time, and now chief executive of the RSA. And he estimated that the contribution to the economy of volunteering is about 40 billion. And the third reason why I think volunteering is so important, this whole subject is so important, is actually absolutely we can see a greater role for volunteering in public services. So we saw this during the pandemic. We saw it from the incredible work of RVS, the Royal Voluntary Service, leading the work with NHS responders. We saw it with the British Red Cross. And 1 in 4 of the jabs in our arms were put in there by a St John's Ambulance volunteer. So you can see how that gives a sort of foretaste of what's going to happen with public services over the coming years. And indeed, at the moment, there is a Prime Ministerial task force looking at how to get more volunteers into health and social care. So what we were trying to do here is say, yes, this is a really important topic for us, but it's also an important topic for the charity sector and critically for wider society. And about a year and a half ago now, many organisations came together, Scouts and Girlguiding amongst them, to form a group called Shaping the Future with Volunteering. Not of volunteering, with volunteering. I co-chair that with Catherine Johnston from Chief Executive of RVS, and that was capturing a spirit of organisations, about 25 of the largest volunteer-involving organisations, coming together who wanted to seize the moment of what had been unleashed in the pandemic and not see this as a one-off, but to see it as something we could play forward. Now, part of that group is about sharing best practice, but critically it's about sharing learning and being honest about where we're not succeeding as well as where we are. Separately, there's a vision for volunteering, which has been led by DCMS with the umbrella bodies coming together to give a roadmap of what success looks like. And then also, the other thing I think was the report that's relevant in terms of this talk is the Kruger report, the Danny Kruger's report on civil society. That one of the things it talked about was a volunteering passport. So how do you use technology to make it as easy as possible to recruit new volunteers, but also so that they could move from one organisation to another organisation? How do you remove the barriers? Now, we seem to be talking less about a volunteer passport now, but we're still talking about a volunteer passport because the essence of what this project is about is unlocking, removing barriers, making it easier to volunteer, and then more seamlessly move between the two organisations.
Girlguiding and Scouting are two of the largest young people organisations in the UK. Volunteers are absolutely central to what we do. Between us, we have more than 200,000 volunteers, and they're supporting young people and their opportunities. Quite simply, we can only have the organisations that we have as a result of volunteers. They deliver volunteering, they deliver the opportunities for young people. But they don't just deliver the opportunities for young people. In our organisations, which are quasi-federated type structures, they recruit, they manage, and they train volunteers in a hierarchical system. They organise at a local level, and in governance terms, volunteers report to volunteers right up until board level. They're not managed by staff. So that is quite a complex governance structure that we have. The volunteers we have range in age from 14 to the mid-90s. Our volunteers often stay with us for a long time, sometimes decades, and they give a lot of free time, more than the national average, to help make the young people have opportunities. We also know that they have, to the first point here, very high enjoyment and satisfaction rates with volunteering, less so with ourselves sometimes, but particularly with volunteering. Now, we wanted to talk a little bit about the demand behind the project. So both of us are facing increased demand post-pandemic for what we offer, in terms of what children want and in terms of what their parents want. We have more problems recruiting volunteers because what volunteers want to give has changed. So more volunteers want hybrid volunteering. They want to do some at home, they want to do some in a place. They want to choose how they volunteer and have, if you like, packages of volunteering. So we saw some of that task-based, if you like, volunteering work particularly well. For example, in the NHS Responder work and on the Good Sam app that was worked. And there you could choose what you wanted to do, when you wanted to do it, how you wanted to do it. So in some ways, a more sort of consumer, transactional approach, perhaps, to volunteering, which is interesting. And although we have some flexibility, and we, of course, have task-based roles, fundamentally, our volunteers are looking after children in a safe and regular fixed place. So that shared challenge we have with many organisations, including in the room and online, is how do we package and shape our volunteering need and offer in alternative ways to meet the needs of volunteers who are delivering directly opportunities to children. And so what we know we needed to do was have that blend of, if you like, regular fixed volunteering and also task specific. And I guess the other point that we're aware of is we've often got more volunteers where we already have volunteers, and we have fewer volunteers where we need volunteers. And that is a whole big issue around our inclusivity as well. And with the thought of inclusivity in mind, For both of us and for many of our organisations, we want our organisations to be ones where everyone feels welcome, feels free to be themselves, and we need to be able to recognise and look honestly at ourselves as organisations. Now, we did that at Girlguiding, as many of you have done recently, and the Dean referred to it here as well. At Girlguiding, we did a diversity and inclusion audit with people from all areas of Girlguiding across the UK, parents, girls, volunteers, staff. And we also made a particular effort to listen to unheard voices. The report that we had was very uncomfortable reading for me and us as leaders. And it was clear that we are not as inclusive as we want to be and need to be, and not as representative of the UK population. And that includes our volunteers. And that's not good enough. And so we have an action plan, a strategic plan, an action plan. And I think some of our key achievements that we're proud of are around practical achievements such as race equity training for senior staff and volunteers. We have volunteer inclusion advisors. We have identity-based staff networks. We have inclusion e-learning for all our volunteers. And we also secured some funding from Garfield Weston, the foundation, to make guiding more accessible to a wide range of volunteers, as we indeed hope this project will be. And that equality, diversity and inclusion as a priority runs through our organisation, Scouting, and many of you here and online as well. Finally, on the report and the inclusivity, I'm proud that we were as open as we were. We published the findings in full and all that means. And where we're heading and where we want to be and all want to be is more inclusive and welcoming as organisations in terms of volunteers and members.
So, like many people, many organisations, pandemic was tough for both Scouts and Girlguiding. We lost a lot of members, young people, during those 2 years, as we all successfully pivoted to online. But I mean, young people's lives, as many of you will know, have just been turned upside down during that period. The good news is that they've come back in droves, which is fantastic. We're both, I think, around 17% increases in the past year. I think for us, it was the highest growth in 1 year since 1942. So that's the good news. But one of the challenges, we had large waiting lists before the pandemic. For Scouts, that waiting list has now gone up to 90,000 young people. So there are 90,000 young people who want to join Scouts but can't, primarily because we don't have enough volunteers, even though we've got 140,000 volunteers. It would be like having a supermarket with people queuing around the block because you can't get the products on the shelves because you haven't got enough people to put the products on the shelves. So this is like not just a nice to have for us, this is business critical. This absolutely is fundamental to us achieving our mission, and actually a sustainable business model as well, if I'm honest, because you need people to come in order for the membership fees and to buy the uniforms and things like that, which allows us to provide the services that you need to run the largest youth organisations in the country. And the reality is we know, as Angela says, that today's volunteers want different things. They want to be more flexible. I say this as someone who for the last 6 years has been a Scout volunteer as well. I couldn't do every week, so we had to have a team-based approach. I couldn't give the same amount of time, and we've got to make life as easy as possible to participate. And I think the one thing we don't talk a lot about is actually it needs to be fun. Volunteering needs to be fun. I mean, I look at, I get inspired by the likes of Parkrun and Good Gym, who've reinvented the thinking around what it is to volunteer. And I think that central component of I turn up because it's fun to be with people is at the heart of really, really successful volunteering. And so this is it was a key aspect of our Skills for Life strategy that we launched in 2018 to improve the volunteer experience. Both recruiting but also retaining people, so really making them feel valued as part of that experience while they're with us also. And that's partly about systems, as we'll talk about. It's fundamentally about culture. It's fundamentally about how people feel about their whole experience as to whether they'll come in through the doors and whether they'll stay. And that's particularly relevant when it comes to equity, diversity and inclusion issues. So we've got 4 strategic objectives. One of them's around growth and one of them's about inclusion. So we don't just want to grow, we want to grow in order to be representative of the communities in which we serve, and so that we reflect UK society. And we know we've got particular challenges around when it comes to race. So 8% of our members have come from a Black, Asian or minority ethnic background. That compares to 14% in the 2011 census, let alone what the results will be in the 2021 census. And that representation gets worse as you go up the hierarchy of the volunteer leadership. So where this project fits, it's within a wide range of programs of work that we've been introducing over the last 8 years. That includes how we transformed our brand and the work we did there to make scouting more appealing. It includes the diversity of ambassadors that we've brought in to create different role models in the organisation. And critically, and probably most relevant, is Squirrels, which is Scouts for 4 and 5-year-olds, which we launched in September last year. Now, that was about how do you make an impact on a young person's life at that critical early years stage? How do you, and the power of non-formal learning and play to transform your, what are called executive skills. Because we know that if you fall behind at that age, you don't catch up. But that only worked for us if it was about an inclusion agenda, only if it was about reaching into communities that we weren't actually reaching, that particularly areas of deprivation. And we've got, so 30% of where we've opened are in IMD 1 to 3. So the 30% most deprived wards in the country. We're over-indexing on Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds with young people and volunteers from those backgrounds in order to change the whole pipeline as they go up through the sections. We had a target to open 300 drays, that's what the groups are called. By April, we're at 619 drays. We'll be at 950 by September. And what's been really interesting is that not only have we recruited an additional 1,800 volunteers, 50% of those have had no experience of scouting before. So it is working, and it is truly transformational, but it's one aspect of a wider programme of work.
So collaboration isn't new to us. It's a journey we've been on since we began. We have a shared history and a shared mission. This picture wasn't in the pandemic. It's around 1939, around sandbanks on the Windows air raid precaution activity. So that community activity between us, that collaboration's always been there. At a local level, it happens very effectively as well. Things like shared premises, using each other's campsites, international camps, jamborees. Importantly and interestingly for this project, we also estimate around 20% of our volunteers also volunteer for the other organisation. And we know there's lots of connections with friends and family. It's not always easy or rosy though. Our shared history is littered with tension points and relationship challenges. And when the Scouts first started considering including girls, for example, in '79, there were some tensions. And some of our volunteers have long memories as well. So it's important to recognise some of the challenges as well as the opportunities.
And then this is our senior leadership team in 2019, the two teams coming together. And this was a bit of a landmark moment because this is where the project that we're talking about today came from. I think the reality is that for the last 10 years, the collaboration has been probably as strong as it's been since our formation in the early 1900s. Why is that the case? I think a lot of it, if I'm honest, has been driven by chief executives. So Julie Bentley, Angela's predecessor, and myself in the first instance, but that then has grown with Angela at the helm as well. So I think the first lesson here is about the role of chief execs in setting the tone for a genuinely collaborative agenda. And that kind of only works if you've got strong relationships. You have to get on. I think you have to like each other, actually. I think it would be really difficult if you didn't like each other. But actually, that sets the foundations for trust. And once you've set those foundations for trust, that starts to cascade across the organisation, because then when we are talking to our teams, not just when we're together, but separately, that is setting a tone where, as all our staff teams start to realise, okay, this is something that we are taking really seriously. And what's been interesting to see is those relationships starting to foster at different levels of the organisation. And one of the things we did was have a joint staff member, who's now, I didn't realise, is at the back of the room, Dave, was a joint staff member. As part of that, having someone in both organisations, both camps, but also starting to make those connections with people at different levels of the organisation as well. So we've met several times. We're going to, as SLT, as senior teams throughout that process, and we're going to meet again in September.
So the project that we're here to focus on and tell you about is made possible quite simply by our funder, the Pears Foundation. Pears are a really excellent funder. I'm not saying that just because they're here. They're really important to both our organisations. So having a trusted relationship with their grantees is central to their ethos. And they are flexible, they're open, they're involved. And critically, you'll all know this as chief execs looking for money and fundraising. But this is different. They ask us what we need rather than telling us what they want to fund. And that is worth as much as the money in many ways. They've given us grants to work together before. We ran something called Space to Grow Together, and we ran that for 2 years, 2018 to 2020, and that was looking for new ways to grow and diversify our movements at a grassroots level. And as well as funding the actual project, Pears offers us their learning and development expertise because they fund a wide range of organisations and projects. So our staff can learn and build relationships and understanding with their staff and with other organisations. And it's credit to them, really, that they notice, because they have prior history, but they noticed that we were often looking to solve the same problems and offered to help us build a collaborative project. So, and that's where the shared project came from, which we were most aligned with and was most urgent, was around this need for volunteers, including from a greater diversity of backgrounds, and we need it yesterday. It was urgent. So we also both needed to speed up our new volunteers' journey and that joining journey and reduce the admin for them, but also for other volunteers who, as we say, actually recruit them. And we wanted to see a better conversion rate in the lingo. We need to see more people through from inquiring to actually becoming a volunteer. But Pears is a great example of the important role funders can play in driving collaboration as well, because without them, we would not be learning all that we're doing as part of this project.
So, this is the project, the Welcome Project. That's what we are working on together at the moment. These images come out of a piece of research that we undertook just before this with a design agency called Snook, who took a user-centered approach to really understanding across the cycle of a volunteer joining to a volunteer leaving. What are the pinch points? What are the points that are actually causing either barriers or distress or upsetting people? And what are the moments as part of that could be uplifting and exciting and enlivening and fun? And they did a major piece of research that informed some of the work when we got into this. And so what the Welcome Project is about is it's got 3 aspects to it. The first aspect is about attraction. So the ways in which we can work together and share our best practice whether that be use of social media, different ways of attracting different groups in. And as part of that, we're going to be doing lots of testing on understanding what is resonating with different groups to bring people to the portal. So that's the first bit. And when then they come to the portal, the user is in control. So the potential volunteer can say, these are the skills I've got, these are the hours I can give, this is what I'm really interested in. And that then links to the next bit, which is the welcoming moment. So then there's the handover from the portal to the local volunteer. And that local engagement, I think, is also very key as well. It's not some corporate, alien, national voice coming in at that point. There is a local connection with volunteer recruiters who are also volunteers, who are having that initial conversation. And that is a key moment. We know from a cultural point of view, that is a moment where you can actually start to capture imaginations, inspire people, and get them over the line. But we are using, as part of that, some digital and automated tools to help smooth that process as well. And then the third stage is the joining moment. So again, we're using the tools to automate processes that have been manual till now, so like reference checking and things like that, to ease the burden of the volunteers locally and the recruiting volunteers as well. So it's as seamless as possible. It's got a mix of online and offline interaction. That's been developed by a company called CloudThing, and they are building the digital tool. One of the things that we're interested in is how we also then make it easier through the tool for people to seamlessly move from one organisation to another, but also that when they come to that portal, they can see the other opportunities, the opportunities in both organisations. So they don't have to be limited just to the Scouts or the Girlguiding opportunities as well. And then governing that is a cross-organisational team featuring staff and volunteers from Girlguiding and Scouts across digital, volunteer experience, comms, technology and project management teams as well. So that's key in terms of that, the governance of that collaborative governance structure, of which Pears Foundation, as a funder, are part of that as well.
So a little bit more on the actual project. So to start with, we needed to agree who we were building the system for and how we wanted it to work, as you might expect. We created some personas which we really appealed to us and work for both of us. And here are 6 of them. So 4 new volunteers and a Scouts and Girlguiding recruiter volunteer as well. Then the teams went on to map out the journey for each of them in the organisation as it is and as it could be. And then that formed the basis of our joint procurement. And we went out to tender with a detailed plan of what we wanted the system to do, including the stories for each of these personas. And we needed more than just a supplier. We needed a partner who understood the ambition and also the complexity of a collaboration of such as the ones we're involved in, and who was up for working with us really to make that vision a reality.
And we had there was a lot of conversations around procurement. So we had a choice, but we were looking at, should it be off the shelf or should it be bespoke? And really what we've done is we've taken one of CloudThing's products that we know are working well with other membership organisations, and we're modifying it in order to attract, welcome and bring on board those new volunteers. And as I mentioned, right the way through, we're co-designing that with volunteers. So we've gone through the discovery phase, we're now in the build phase, and part of that means we're developing prototypes of aspects of that, of the product, and then testing it on a classic test and learn sprint model as we go along. It's going to be the same under the bonnet, but the front facing will be skinned differently, depending on whether it's with Girlguiding or a Scout inquiry. But as I mentioned, you'll be able to see both sets of opportunities. And then, of course, there's the joy of integrating it with all our other systems, including our membership systems, so that the data we collect will feed straight into the next stage of that process.
So a word really on the opportunities and the challenges. You can probably guess some of these. So the fact that we have so much in common is our biggest opportunity. So our volunteer structures, our history, our ethos, plus the challenges we're facing right now are just the same. But by working together, we've obviously got the opportunity to share the costs, share the benefits. We've also got the added weight of our organisations, the sheer size of it, whether that's looking to work together to build better relationships with suppliers, or having this joint back office staff team where it makes sense, or building a digital tool together so we can continue to share the cost as we improve it. We're of course sharing on an ongoing basis the lessons we're learning in the project, but also more widely. And as Matt said, this project touches almost every area of our organisation, so communications, HR, digital, tech, volunteer support, staff management. It's across them all. And by working together, we're also learning how each other does things around here, sharing what we've learned, and we're also celebrating our successes. So this shared digital tool will give us insights, it will give us reporting, and then we can carry on sharing that too, where it makes sense, involving particularities as well as generalities. And looking at our own data, we can see where we've got strengths to build on, areas of concern, and we'll have the opportunity to compare the insight, and the plan is to double the benefit of that insight as we're learning.
And then in terms of some of the challenges, they've probably been self-evident as I've been talking, but these are big, complex beasts with lots of volunteers, people who are deeply, deeply passionate about our movements going back many, many years, and some things will feel very, very important to one person that might not be as important to another person. So navigating that with political sensitivity has been key. The pandemic was a bit of a challenge, but actually I think in a way, the consequences of the pandemic are raising and have raised more challenges, particularly, and any one of you involved in running charities at the moment, or any organisation will get this at the moment, in terms of recruitment of staff and talent in this space, which is getting more and more and more expensive. So how do you recruit and retain the best digital people, I think is a major challenge. In fact, we were discussing this on a call with a couple of colleagues this morning, a major challenge for the charity sector when you can't always afford what you need to afford. So that's been a big challenge. Decision making, one colleague had described it as taking 4 times as long by working together. It's difficult enough in a Scouts case, a federation of 8,000 charities to make decisions, let alone whether you then combine that with a similar-minded organisation. And I think the trade-off with that is things take longer, and you have to be more patient. And again, this is where a supportive funder who's with you every step of the way is so key, because involving them in those conversations is fundamental. We've got this, for both of us, this is part of a much wider digital transformation programme. Learning experience systems, new membership systems. So there are lots of interdependencies on both sides that are taking a lot of effort from our project management teams. And just that kind of cultural bit about ultimately why are we doing this? Why are we not doing it on our own? And then taking our teams with us has been a big challenge as well.
So from our long collaboration journey that we've outlined, we know we expect it to be ups and downs. We are committed to sticking together and working on it together for the young people that we serve. Over the next year, we've got lots of work to do, developing, iterating, rolling out the new system. As we were saying, it's not launched yet. We're going to continue to document the lessons we're learning and look for new opportunities to collaborate and innovate together in the interests of young people. But as you would all know, the real work starts once it's launched, and you'll know that yourselves. That's when the real work starts. And there'll then be more developments we want to make and lessons to learn. And when the project is launched and the money's spent, we will have a system that we're both invested in more ways than one, and we intend to continue to work together to support and evolve it.
And, you know, some key lessons that we've touched on along the way, trust, importance of funders, importance of CEOs leading the challenge, and flexibility, I would say, are some of the key takeaways. So, where next? Well, Angela's touched on some of this already, but look, ultimately, I think one of the things that's been so powerful about this project is that at its heart is about learning. You know, it's probably relevant that we're doing this in a university, in a business school, because that requires certain characteristics and attributes at all levels of leadership within staff and volunteers. Listening and learning and adapting and accepting that where we're not getting things right, and having those open conversations with a supportive funder as well. That is how we will work our way through this with the right values and the right leadership style as well. So we will continue along the way to update you, share what's going well, what's not going so well, and also to listen from other people as well. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.